Story 1. The screams came from beneath the ice. I took the job because I needed to get away. There's no better way to disappear for a while than heading up into the teeth of Appalachia in January, especially when you're promised free meals and a check at the end of it. The lodge was up near High Knob, deep in the Cumberland Range, far enough from the closest town that snowmobiles were more reliable than trucks. It sat alone by a lake with a name I couldn't pronounce, surrounded by timberline and silence so thick it felt like the woods were holding their breath. I got there just after New Year's. My job was simple: keep the pipes from freezing, feed the generator, shovel the walks when the wind dumped 3 feet overnight. The owners lived down the mountain and only checked in by radio every couple days. "Don't expect visitors," the old man said as he handed me a ring of antique keys. "And if you hear something at night, don't go looking. Things echo funny out here." At first, I thought he meant coyotes or maybe those strange temperature snaps that make old wood scream in the dark. But by the third night, I knew better. It was around 3 in the morning when I first heard it. A sound I don't ever want to hear again, though I know I will. Probably in my sleep, or maybe when I'm sitting alone too long. It started low, like a muffled cry, but it swelled into this awful, wet gurgle, like someone was drowning right outside my window, not just calling for help, fighting, dying. The sound had layers to it, a bubbling, a gasping, a rawness I can't explain. I shot upright in bed, heart pounding, unsure if I was still dreaming. I waited. Silence. Then, just as I was starting to think maybe it was a loon or some weird echo off the tree line, it started again. Louder this time. Closer. I grabbed the flashlight and boots and ran out the back door. The cold hit me like a slap. Snow was up to my knees and the moon was high, spilling silver across the lake. The surface of it looked like glass, thick and solid with the kind of deep ice you only get in places where the sun forgets to rise for days. I scanned the lake with my light. At first, nothing, just the vast, still sheet of ice stretching out into the woods. Then I saw them, bubbles, big ones, trapped under the ice near the dock. They were moving, darting back and forth, like something alive was underneath, thrashing. I stepped out onto the frozen edge, cautious, the beam of the flashlight following the trail. Then I saw it. A handprint. Not on the surface, but inside the ice, just beneath, pressed flat like someone had slammed it there with everything they had. 5 fingers splayed wide, palm, bloody, frozen in place. My breath caught, and my legs almost gave out. Then came the pounding from underneath the ice. 3 sharp thuds, then silence. I backed off fast, stumbling in the snow, light shaking in my hand. There were no cracks, no holes, no footprints leading to the ice. Nothing. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I tried to radio the owner. Static. When it finally crackled to life around noon, I told him what I saw. "You're not the first," he said after a pause. "That lake's older than any map. It doesn't give back what it takes. Don't stare too long at it, and don't answer when it calls." That should have been enough to send me packing, but I stayed. Part pride, part stupidity. I told myself maybe it was some kind of natural gas vent, or a trick of light, but deep down, I knew. The next few nights were quiet, like whatever was under there had gone still again. But the air around the lake changed, heavier, like the cold itself was watching. I stopped walking near the shoreline, kept to the back entrance, slept with a fire going and the radio on, though it mostly spit static. Then came the 5th night. I woke up again at 3:12 a.m. I remember the exact time because I glanced at the cracked wall clock just as the screaming began. This time, it wasn't gurgling, it was shrieking. A man's voice, twisted in agony. It echoed through the trees and rattled the glass in the windows. I stayed in bed, clutching the flashlight like a weapon, too afraid to breathe. Then something knocked, once, on the back door. I didn't answer. Eventually, the screaming stopped. Morning came pale and bitter. I forced myself out to check the perimeter. That's when I saw it. By the edge of the lake, just where the dock began, something frozen into the ice. I got closer, and my gut turned to iron. It was a boot. An old leather work boot, cracked and worn, frozen solid into the ice, half submerged. It was filled with blood. Nobody, no tracks, just the boot. I didn't touch it, I couldn't. I just stood there, staring until my toes went numb and something inside me whispered that I should never come back out here again. I packed up that evening, left the keys on the counter, didn't wait for the owners to call. I rode the snowmobile down to the old service road and didn't look behind me once. I never got paid for that job, but I don't care. Sometimes I still hear the screaming late at night when the wind howls just right. And in winter, when the rivers freeze, I find myself avoiding the shorelines altogether. The thing is, I think the lake remembers me now. Story 2. What the Hollow Girl Whispers. I was 17 the winter it happened. That age where the world still feels like it might be yours, if only you could figure out how to hold it right. I'd just gotten my license 2 weeks before, and my uncle had lent me his rusted Ford for a Friday run into town. I remember the heat was barely working, and the radio only caught one station, tinny bluegrass and the occasional weather alert. Snow had crusted along the trees in ribbons, and the sun was already dropping when I left Whitesburg. I was headed back toward the ridge my folks lived on, past that old spur road no one used anymore, the one that veered off past Miller Creek and just sort of dissolved into the woods. Most people avoided it, said it hadn't been maintained since the 70s, but I liked the quiet of it. It felt forgotten, like you could think there. I was maybe 2 miles into it when I saw her. She was standing just off the shoulder near a patch of skeletal pine, wearing a thin, sleeveless dress the color of dead grass. No jacket, no shoes. Her hair hung in strings past her shoulders, dark and flat, and her arms were folded against her stomach like she was cold but didn't know how to say it. I slowed instinctively, then stopped without really thinking. She looked like she couldn't have been more than 14. Her skin was pale, not just from the cold. Pale in a way that made her seem hollowed out, like something had pulled the blood from her a long time ago and forgot to put it back. She didn't wave me down, didn't move at all, just stared at me with eyes too dark for the daylight. I rolled down the window and asked if she needed help. No answer. She didn't blink. Didn't look scared either. Just still, like a picture someone left out too long. "Do you want a ride?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She nodded, slow and deliberate, and walked over to the passenger side. I unlocked the door and she climbed in without saying a word. The cabin of the truck was quiet except for the squeal of the defroster. She stared straight ahead, hands folded neatly in her lap. I glanced at her now and then, trying to make sense of her. There were no scratches, no bruises, no dirt on her legs. But something about her was wrong. Not loud wrong, not horror movie wrong, just subtly off. Like a dream that feels normal until you wake up and realize the colors were all backwards. I asked her name. Nothing. I asked if she lived nearby. Still nothing. The road twisted sharply around the old McFarland barn and started dipping into the dense part of the hollow. Trees grew tighter here, branches bowed in like they were listening. The snow had started falling again, soft and lazy. My tires crunched slowly over gravel and old frost heaves. Still, she said nothing. We drove like that for maybe 10 minutes. No towns, no homes, just woods swallowing up the light. Then, just as I was starting to ask again where she needed to go, she raised her hand and pointed to a rusted cattle gate sunk into the tree line. It wasn't locked, just sagging under its own weight, half swallowed by ivy and old fence posts. I hadn't noticed it before. I don't think it was there the last time I took that road. "You live back there?" I asked. She turned to look at me for the first time, eyes like muddy water, no fear, no thanks, no expression. Then she leaned forward, lips close to my ear, and whispered something. To this day, I couldn't tell you what it was. Not because I don't remember, but because it didn't sound like words. It was a breath, a tone, something soft and ancient, like wind whispering through a church with no walls. I felt it more than I heard it, inside my head, down my neck, behind my eyes. And then she was gone. I didn't see her open the door, didn't see her walk away. 1 second she was in the truck, the next, the seat was empty and the snow was falling heavier. I blinked. My hands were shaking. I tried to start the truck, but everything inside me was screaming that something was wrong. That's when I had the seizure. I don't remember the convulsions. Just a flash of light, and then a long, slow blackout, like falling through water with no bottom. When I came to, the truck was parked on the side of a road I didn't recognize, 10 miles from where I'd picked her up. The sky was pitch black, the engine was off, and there was blood in my mouth. I sat up slowly, every muscle aching. My jaw was sore, and my tongue felt torn. I touched my lip. Blood. A lot of it. Then I saw the passenger seat. Folded neatly there, like someone had taken their time with it, was the girl's dress. Same one. Same dead grass color. Dry and still warm, like it hadn't been there long. But she was gone. There were no footprints in the snow outside, no sign of anyone walking away. I checked the back seat. Nothing. I drove home in silence, afraid to turn the heat on, afraid to play the radio, like even sound might bring her back. My mother found me in the morning on the front porch, keys still in my hand, eyes wide open but not seeing. I didn't speak for 2 days. When I finally did, I couldn't explain it. The truck had no damage. No evidence I'd been anywhere but that old spur road. My uncle never asked why I returned it with a bloodstain on the seat. Maybe he knew better. Over the years, I tried to piece it together. I even went back once, thinking maybe I'd imagined it all. But the gate wasn't there anymore. Nothing but thorns and an old creek bed. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find the exact spot where I picked her up. I've talked to a few locals, real old-timers, and one woman said something that stuck with me. She told me about a girl who went missing in the 50s, last seen near that same hollow, wearing a dress too thin for the season. Said her name was Eliza, and that she was always quiet even before she disappeared. Folks said she was odd, touched by something before she was born. They found her shoes by the river, but not her body. Some say she still walks that road, looking for someone to listen to. Not everyone survives what she says. Some folks go quiet forever. Others wake up far from where they started, like they were used and returned slightly wrong. I don't tell this story often. People either don't believe it, or worse, they do. And if they do, they always want to know what she whispered. But that's the thing. I don't know. I hear it sometimes when I'm about to fall asleep. A breath on the edge of language. A sound that chills the bones from the inside. And lately, I've been thinking about the blood on my teeth. What if it wasn't mine? Story 3. The Man with No Feet in the Orchard. It was the last week of October when I went out to Vance Hollow with my cousin Ethan. We'd always called it the Lost Orchard, though no one in town ever mentioned it. Not even the oldest folks who remembered the moonshine raids and coal mine strikes. Just rows and rows of crooked apple trees way out past where the roads gave up. The place didn't show up on any map I ever saw. And the gate wasn't more than 2 rusted wires twisted between fence posts swallowed by bramble. But the apples, Lord, they were perfect. Red as blood, sweet as syrup. I don't know who planted them or why they kept growing, but they did. Every fall, even when no one picked them. We'd gone out there a few times over the years, always late in the season when most folks had already forgotten about cider and pie. You could fill 5 bushels in an hour, easy. That day, though, something was wrong from the start. The air was heavy, wet in a way that made your clothes stick to your back, even though the temperature was barely 50. The wind didn't move right either. It came in little stutters, like someone breathing through cracked lips. And the trees, they didn't rustle so much as creak, like something old and hollow bending under its own weight. Ethan didn't seem to notice. He was always the louder one, always pushing ahead without thinking. We split up to cover more ground, him going toward the far end of the grove where the apples hung low and thick, me sticking near the slope where the sunlight could still cut through. I remember hearing the first crack just before sunset, not a branch snapping, more like a boot stepping on dry bone. I turned and saw nothing, just the long rows of apple trees leaning in at angles, casting shadows that didn't quite match the trunks. Then I saw Ethan. He was maybe 50 yards off, standing dead still between 2 trees. I waved. He didn't move. I called his name. Nothing. I started toward him, slower than I should have. The sound of my own breath louder than it had any right to be. That's when I saw him. A man, or what used to be a man, drifting between the trees. He came out from behind a crooked Macintosh tree near Ethan, silent and gliding. Not walking, just hovering, like the wind had picked him up and forgot to set him down again. From the knees up, he looked almost normal. Dirty overcoat, slumped shoulders, face pale and long like something carved from candle wax. But below that, there was nothing. Just air where his legs should have been, vanishing into the dusk. His coat floated too, swaying slowly and off-kilter, like it didn't know which direction the body was facing. I stopped dead, my legs refused to move. Ethan turned finally and looked at me, but his eyes weren't right. They were wide, fixed on something I couldn't see. And then the man moved again, with those twitchy, broken gestures like frames missing in an old film reel. He glided right between us and turned his head, slow and creaky, until his face was locked on mine. I'll never forget the way his mouth opened, like a yawn stretched too far. It kept going until I swore I could see down to the base of his throat. But there was no sound, just that endless, silent scream pointed right at me. I don't know how long I stood there or how I finally moved. All I know is I ran, dropped the apples, didn't stop till I hit the ridge and saw Ethan scrambling behind me, pale and soaked with sweat, like he'd been underwater. We didn't talk much on the way home, just sat in silence. A truck rattling over the gravel road like it was trying to shake us loose. That night, Ethan had a seizure in his sleep. I woke up to the sound of him thrashing against the bunk wall, foam spilling from his lips. He bit down so hard on his own tongue he tore a piece clean off. We got him to the hospital just in time. The nurse said it was the worst seizure she'd seen in someone his age without any history of epilepsy. He hasn't spoken a word since. That was 3 years ago. We don't talk about the orchard, not even in whispers. I've gone back once, just to see if it was real, but I couldn't find it. The fence posts were gone. The road ended at a patch of rock slide I swear wasn't there before, just trees, too thick, too quiet, and that same heavy air, like breath waiting to be exhaled. Ethan sits most days on the porch, eyes glassy, hands twitching when the wind rustles the leaves just right. He sleeps with the lights on now. I asked him once, real careful, if he remembered what happened out there. He looked at me, slow, and raised his hand. With one shaking finger he traced the motion of a mouth opening, wider, wider, and then stopped. I don't go near orchards anymore, not even for pie. And when I see apples at the store stacked in perfect rows under those fluorescent lights, I look the other way. Because sometimes, in the space between breaths, I swear I hear that silent scream again. And I don't think it was ever meant for just one of us. Story 4. Screams from the dry well. We bought the Anders place because it was cheap and quiet. That was enough for me. After 20 years of factory noise, I just wanted a porch, a wood stove, and enough land to breathe without hearing a damn thing but wind through the trees. The house sat just outside of Dalton, up on a slope where the land dipped into thick hardwoods. No neighbors, no traffic. Just one long gravel road winding up from town like it was having second thoughts. They told us not to buy it. Old-timers at the feed store gave each other side eyes when I asked about the property. A man in line behind me even muttered, "That well's still there," like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. The agent brushed it off, said it was all small-town superstition, said the previous owners just couldn't handle the quiet. We didn't listen. I wish we had. The house was a little beat up, but solid. Needed new gutters, the porch had a lean to it, and the chimney probably hadn't seen a fire since Carter was president, but it had bones. Good bones, we thought. There was one thing, though, just out back, behind the shed. A round stone well, old as the hills, and sealed with a rusted sheet of iron. 6 heavy padlocks clung to the lid like barnacles, no rope, no crank, just a silent, squat mouth in the earth, welded shut. I joked it looked like a bunker. My wife didn't laugh. She said it made her feel cold just looking at it. And she was right. It had a presence. Like it didn't belong to us or to the land, just something that was tolerated there, like a tumor under the skin. I asked around about it the first few weeks we lived there. Nobody gave me a straight answer. One guy at the mill said the Anders family sealed it up after their boy went missing. Another said there'd been some kind of sickness in the 1930s. Something that got down into the water and made people act wrong. One woman whispered that her great-uncle used to hear voices coming out of it before it was sealed. She wouldn't say more, just crossed herself and walked away. We didn't go near it, not for a long while, not until the night the crying started. It was about 3 in the morning. My wife shook me awake and said she heard something outside. I listened. At first, it sounded like a hurt animal, whimpering, soft, almost childlike. I got up, grabbed the old flashlight and stepped out onto the porch. The woods were silent, no wind, no bugs, just that crying coming from the back of the house. I followed it around, slow and careful, feet crunching on frosted grass. And as I came around the corner, the sound got sharper, more human. It was definitely a person, a girl, maybe 10 or 11, sobbing from somewhere low. I froze when I realized exactly where the sound was coming from. The well. I stood there a long minute, just listening. The crying turned into hiccuping gasps, then words, too soft to make out. I stepped a little closer, keeping my distance, aiming the flashlight at the lid. Nothing had moved. The locks were still there. The iron still rusted and shut tight, but the crying kept going. I wanted to believe it was a prank, some backwoods kids with a speaker and too much free time. But the thing was, the sound wasn't coming from the well. It was coming from inside it, like it was rising up through layers of stone. I backed off and went inside, told my wife it was probably a fox or raccoon. She didn't press, but neither of us slept. The next night, it came back, louder, longer. This time it didn't stop. It cried from dusk till near dawn. And it wasn't just crying anymore. It was screaming, words clear and shrill. "Help me!" Over and over, rising through the floorboards like steam, like it wanted to. We packed that night, didn't argue, didn't wait. Just threw clothes in the back of the truck, slammed doors, and left. leave the coffee still hot in the pot, left the dog bowls on the kitchen floor, didn't even lock the damn front door. When we returned the next morning to grab what we'd left, something had changed. All 6 padlocks were gone. Not cut, not broken, just gone. The iron lid had been slid off and set neatly on the grass beside the well. No scratches, no signs of force. And the hole, God, that hole, was open. It looked too dark, too deep. The edges seemed too smooth, like something had been crawling up and down it for years, polishing the stone with its passing. I leaned in just far enough to look. No sound came out, no echo even when I dropped a rock. But the smell, if you can call it that, rose up like a dead thing long buried in heat. Not rot, not water. Something worse, something old and chemical and wrong. We left again, faster this time, didn't even take the boxes. We sold the place through a friend without ever going back. Signed papers at a diner in another county, never met the buyer. I didn't want to. But the worst part isn't what we saw. It's what happened after. Sometimes in the quiet of night, I still hear it. That crying. In hotel rooms, in rest stops, even once at my sister's place up north. My wife hears it too. She doesn't say so, but I know. I see the way she flinches at drains, at open pipes, at any sound that echoes upward. And lately, there's something new. Sometimes we wake up to water stains on the floorboards. But we live on the 2nd story now, far above any plumbing. I think they found a way to follow us. Or maybe we took something with us, something that didn't want to be left behind. Whatever was down there, it didn't stay. Story 5. Her voice in the rain drain. I'd parked the trailer out past Pike County, off an old coal access road that doesn't even show up on most maps. It was cheap land, mostly forgotten, carved out between tree-covered ridges and the ghosts of mines that hadn't seen light since before I was born. Folks said the mountain back there had collapsed in the 60s, swallowed half a company of men, and left the ground too unstable for building. But I wasn't building. I just needed a place to breathe, away from people and their questions. The trailer was old but solid, hauled in from Somerset and set up with a portable tank and enough solar to keep the fridge running and a lamp on. It was meant to be temporary. I told myself that a lot. But once you get used to the quiet, real quiet, it gets harder to leave. That fall, the rains came hard. Thick, cold storms that dumped buckets of water onto the mountain and turned every ditch into a creek. Most nights I'd fall asleep to the sound of it drumming the roof, a steady rhythm that blurred into dreams. But around mid-October, I started hearing something different, something smaller. Whispering, low and wet, like someone breathing words through a mouthful of river water. It didn't come from the woods, where I might expect it. It came from underneath. There's a corrugated drain pipe that runs beneath the trailer. One of those wide aluminum jobs meant to keep rainwater from pooling near the skirting. It empties about 20 feet behind the back steps, near the slope where the ground drops fast into pine and shale. That first night, I was lying in bed, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling, when I heard it, my name, just barely there, like someone saying it with their lips pressed against a glass. I sat up and listened. Nothing, just the rain. But the whisper had crawled inside me like a splinter. The next night, I heard it again, louder, wet, like a child sobbing through a straw. I told myself it was the wind. Maybe some local kid was messing around, though there weren't any houses for miles. Still, I walked the perimeter with a flashlight, checking the woods and calling out. Got nothing but the sound of water rushing downhill. The third night, it said my name again, clearer this time, soft and slow, drawn out like a lullaby gone wrong. I stood by the back steps for a long time, staring into the woods, trying to work up the nerve. Then I crouched by the edge of the trailer and aimed my light into the pipe. At first, it was just mud and darkness. But then, at the far end, something moved. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a girl. Bare feet tucked up under its body, one thin arm braced against the dirt like it was waiting to crawl forward. It was just outside the edge of my flashlight's beam, but I could see enough to know it was breathing, shallow, fast, and wet. I couldn't make out a face, just skin, pale and dirty, and hair clumped down around the shoulders like wet rope. It whispered again, "I know what you did." I dropped the flashlight. That's when I crawled out, fast as I could. Heart jackhammering in my chest, knees scraping the dirt. I slammed the back door, locked it, and turned on every light in the place. Sat in the middle of the floor with my granddad's hunting knife clutched tight until the sun came up. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe right. Because I did something 20 years ago, before I ever thought I'd end up living in a rusted trailer on the edge of nowhere. I made a mistake, a bad one of those things you bury so deep in your own gut that you almost forget it's there, until something starts digging. Back then, I was just a dumb teenager, messing around with some older boys who liked to take risks. One night we were drinking by the quarry and there was this girl, quiet, younger than the rest of us. I didn't know her name. I didn't ask. Things got blurry after the first bottle. I remember laughing. I remember her crying. I remember the sound of something breaking when she ran and slipped down the shale. The boys told me to forget it, told me no one would believe her, but she never got to tell anyone. She never came back up. We didn't speak about it after that, not once. It disappeared into the dust behind all the other mistakes, until now. After that night at the trailer, I tried to leave, packed up and drove toward town, but the road was washed out. Dead trees blocked the switchback, and every time I tried another route, I found myself right back at that spot. The trailer squatted like a wound in the dirt. The drainpipe is still glistening with rain. I didn't sleep inside again. I started camping in my truck. I'd keep the windows up and the doors locked, but sometimes, just before sleep could take me, I'd hear it again, low and patient. "I know what you did." Sometimes it would say other things, specific things, details only I remembered. Her shoes, the way she screamed before the fall, things I never told anyone, things no one could have known unless they'd been there, unless they never really left. 2 weeks went by before I broke. I crawled under the trailer again, flashlight and crowbar in hand, determined to find whatever was hiding in that pipe. I needed to see it. I needed it to be someone, a sick kid, a squatter, even some kind of mad vagrant. I just needed it to be real. But there was nothing, just the empty pipe, slick with mud, curving down into the hill like a throat. Still, I knew something had been there. I left Pike County the next day, took what I could and left the rest to rot. Didn't sell the trailer, just left it, let the weeds take it, but it didn't end there. I've moved 3 times since, changed numbers, changed jobs. I started going by my middle name, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear her. Not in a drain, not in a pipe, but in my dreams, whispering, soft and endless, from somewhere I can't find the bottom of. And every time it rains, I wake up to puddles around the bed, dirty footprints on the tile, and a voice, just barely audible through the sound of the water, whispering what I've never dared say out loud. "I know what you did." Story 6. Screams in the timberline fog. I took the lookout job because I needed silence. Not peace, exactly. Just distance. From people, from noise, from all the little lies you tell yourself when you live too close to others. Up near Black Mountain. That kind of distance is easy to find. They assigned me to a tower that sat so high, the air thinned out your thoughts. The kind of place where fog rolled in like it had a will of its own, coiling around pine trunks and vanishing sound in every direction. The radio was my lifeline. The trees were my company, and the silence at first felt like safety. It was late September when the weather turned and the fog started creeping in earlier each day. The mornings felt like walking through wet cotton, soundless, thick, muffled. I'd wake to find the trees outside the tower window blurred and swaying like ghosts behind frosted glass. The air smelled wrong when the fog came in. Not sour exactly, just too still, like the earth forgot how to breathe. That morning started like the others. I brewed coffee over the tiny burner, checked the logs and radioed in a report. Then I heard it. Faint at first, but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. A scream, far off. Then again, louder. I froze. You get used to animals out there. Bobcats wailing like babies, coyotes yipping in the dark. But this wasn't that. This was a person, a man, screaming over and over from somewhere in the timberline where the pines grow tight and the fog swallows up the light. I called it in, but the ranger station was 70 miles off and barely picked up my signal. Static swallowed most of what I said. They told me to stay put and not go out alone. Said a team would check in when visibility improved. I waited. Hours passed. The fog thickened. Just before dusk, the screaming came back. Closer this time. It wasn't random. It repeated. 3 short screams, then a pause. Over and over like it was asking something, begging or warning. I couldn't sit still. I packed the emergency bag, clipped on the radio and grabbed the old flashlight. My boots hit the gravel path like I was walking into a tunnel. I didn't even lock the door behind me. Something in me said I'd be back before long. Something else whispered maybe I wouldn't. The timberline wasn't far, just past the rocky slope where the old firebreak ran. But by the time I reached it, the fog was so thick I couldn't see my own boots. The trees loomed close, wet bark slick to the touch. Every step made the ground groan underfoot. Then came the screams again, so close it felt like they were in the trees right next to me. I turned in a slow circle, flashlight catching nothing but mist and the dark glint of wet leaves. I called out, shouted that I was with the service, that I could help. But the screams didn't answer. They only repeated, like a recording stuck on a loop. Then, silence. I kept moving past a bend in the trail that barely existed, through trees I didn't recognize. That's when I saw the clearing. Just a bare patch of earth about 15 feet wide, ringed with dead pine needles and the faint smell of smoke. In the center lay a boot, torn, crusted with mud. Next to it, something half buried in the moss. A badge. I picked it up. It was old, dull, forest green with the state emblem worn down by time. I rubbed the grime from the nameplate and felt my throat tighten. It had my name on it. Not someone with my name. My full name. First, middle, last. Stamped clean into the metal like it had always belonged to me. The only thing was, I'd never been issued a badge. I wasn't even official, just seasonal fire watch. No certification, no ID beyond a walkie and a clipboard. I dropped it and stepped back. And then I saw the prints, barefoot, wide set, humans, leading from the edge of the clearing into the timberline and back again, over and over, like someone had paced that spot for hours, waiting, or maybe circling. My radio crackled. Then he died. The fog pressed in harder. I turned and started back, but the trail didn't look the same. Trees I didn't recognize. A stump that hadn't been there before. I moved faster, heart pounding, branches snagging my sleeves. Another scream, but this time, not from ahead, from behind. I ran, I don't remember how long. Hours, maybe. until the fog thinned just enough to catch a glimpse of the tower lights blinking through the mist. I hauled myself up the ladder, slammed the hatch shut, and stayed crouched in the corner of the cabin until daylight. I called it in again at first light, told them everything. They sent a team, searched the trail, found nothing, no boot, no badge, no prints, just my own gear, soaked from the rain and left in the clearing like it had been waiting. They said stress can do strange things. Fog plays tricks. They offered time off, said someone would relieve me by the end of the week, but no one came. And now, every morning just before dawn, I hear the screams again, closer than before, and each night I check the lock on the hatch 3 times, because I think whatever was out there, it wasn't lost. I think it was looking for me, and I think it found me. Story 7. Echoes that answered. Back when I was a boy, maybe 9 or 10, I'd play this game out behind our old cabin, stand on the edge of the back ridge and yell into the valley below just to hear my voice bounce back. The hills out past Mill Hollow had this way of holding sound, like the mountains were chewing on your words before spitting them back out. I thought it was just the way echoes worked, slow, drawn out, a little off sometimes if the wind was moving. I used to shout silly things just to laugh at how strange my own voice came back. But one evening, close to dusk, I realized something was off. It was my little brother Eli who caught it first. He was 6, barefoot in overalls, and always trailing after me. We'd been arguing, and Ma had threatened to tan us both if we didn't stop. Eli stomped off and yelled into the valley. "I didn't take Pa's flask," his voice rang out, thin and high. We waited. The echo came back slower than usual, dragged like something wet being pulled across the rocks. And it didn't say what he yelled. It came back clear, too clear. "You did." We stood there, frozen. I laughed at first and said it was just a trick of the air, but Eli didn't laugh. His mouth hung open, eyes big and wet. We went home quietly. That night, I woke up to the front door creaking. I looked out the window and saw him walking barefoot toward the woods, slow and stiff like he was listening for something. We chased him down an hour later near the frost line, a mile out from the cabin. He was curled beneath an old cedar, shivering, whispering to the dark. Words that didn't make sense, like names we'd never heard and questions no one asked. We never played the echo game again. But sometimes, if I'm out there now, I'll catch the wind shifting just right, and it feels like something's still listening, like the hills never forgot our voices. Story 8. The Scream Inside the Photograph. It was late July when I decided to finally fix the leaning fence out by the old barn, one of those chores I kept putting off, like most things after we moved out here, the kind of work that doesn't get noticed until it gets dangerous. The post hole gave way easy, too easy, and when I pried up the rock beneath, there it was. A rusted tin box, sealed with brittle leather straps. Looked like something forgotten a long time ago, maybe by the folks who built this place back in the 40s. I popped it open, thinking maybe old tools or coins, but instead, it was full of Polaroids. Dozens of them. Each one showed someone different, all strangers, all alone in the woods, with the same look of unfiltered panic, mouths open mid-scream, eyes glassy like they'd seen something coming just behind the camera. No writing on the backs, no dates, no hint of who they were. I didn't say anything to my wife at first, just left the box on the workbench in the shed. But later that night, something strange happened. I swear, when I was flipping through them again by the window, I could hear it, soft, low, like wind through cracked glass, screaming, not loud, not from outside, but from behind the photos. I told myself it was nothing, just my ears playing tricks. Maybe the wind is catching the corners of the shed, but then Sarah started talking in her sleep. whispering things I couldn't understand, crying sometimes. She'd wake up sweating, claiming she dreamed of tall trees and narrow trails, of moss-covered rocks and the same clearing every time. One day, I showed her a photo, one of a woman standing in a ravine, mouth open, eyes wide with something awful behind the lens. Sarah froze, said that was the place, the exact place from her dream. I asked if she recognized the woman, but she just shook her head and wouldn't talk about it again. 2 nights later, I woke up alone. Her side of the bed is still warm, covers peeled back like she left in a hurry. The back door was ajar, no tracks, just mist rolling in off the trees and the distant sound of something not quite wind. I called her name until my throat burned. Nothing. I searched the woods for hours with a flashlight, thinking maybe she was sleepwalking, but she was just gone. When I came back inside at dawn, I saw it, wedged in the doorframe, one fresh Polaroid. The colors were still bleeding into the paper like it had just printed. It was Sarah. She was in that same clearing from before, mid-scream, mouth open wide like it hurt to breathe. And behind her, out of focus in the trees, something long and thin was watching. I didn't open the shed again after that, didn't show the photo to anyone. But some nights, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I still hear her, screaming faintly behind the paper. Story 9. The Bell That Rings in the Fog. Every fall, around late September, the fog starts to roll in over Millstone Ridge like clockwork. Thick stuff, the kind that clings to your clothes and makes your porch lights useless. Folks around here always said not to go wandering when the fog comes. And whatever you do, don't go out if you hear a bell. Just an old mountain tale, I figured. My granddad used to say that when the ridge gets quiet and the bell starts tolling, that's the land warning you. I thought it was just a way to keep kids from getting lost in the fields after dark. Last year, right after the first frost, the fog came heavy and early. I was fixing the back fence when it crept in low, rolling like smoke through the hayfield. I should have gone in. I remember that now. But what caught me was the sound, soft like a church bell muffled in wool. Slow, deliberate rings. 1, pause. 2. It sounded like it came from the other side of the pasture, maybe near the tree line. I stood there for a good minute, just listening. Then I made the worst mistake of my life. I stepped off the porch and walked into it. The moment I left the light behind, I was blind. The fog was so thick you couldn't see your own hands. I tried to use the fence line to guide me, but somehow it was gone. No wind, no animals. Just that bell ringing soft and steady. I kept going, thinking maybe some kids were playing a prank or a cow had knocked into an old piece of junk. Then I saw it, just a shape at first, tall, too tall, and standing completely still in the fog like it had been waiting. I froze. The fog shifted just enough to show me its face, or what should have been a face. There wasn't one. Just a rusted bell where its mouth should have been, held in place by skin that looked stretched and wrong. It tilted its head at me, just slightly, and the bell rang again. Just once. I don't remember falling, don't remember turning to run. I don't even remember getting back. I woke up the next morning face down in my own pasture, dirt packed into my teeth and gums so tight it cracked one of my molars. My boots were gone. The front door was still locked from the inside, and I haven't been able to whistle since. Not even a squeak. The doctor says my vocal cords look fine, but it's like something deep in my chest refuses. And every year now, when the fog rolls in and the nights get long, I hear it again. Just one bell, somewhere out past the hayfield, and I stay inside, hands shaking, praying it doesn't ring twice. Story 10. The Screaming Behind the Sheetrock. We remodeled the guest bedroom last summer, thinking we'd finally make the place nice enough for my sister to come visit with her kids. The house is old. My grandfather built it with his own hands back in '42, and you can still smell the sawdust and pipe smoke if you press your nose to the floorboards. When we ripped the room down to the studs, the insulation was brittle, yellowed like old teeth. I was halfway through pulling it out when I saw the message. Just faint scratches at first, I almost missed it. But there it was, clear as day once you looked hard enough. She screams every night. It wasn't written in marker or ink. It was gouged in like with a nail or a finger. I showed my wife. We laughed. Said maybe Grandpa had a sense of humor after all. We sealed it up and hung a new sheetrock. 2 nights later, around 2:15 a.m., I woke to the sound of a woman screaming. Not outside, not in the woods, from the wall. One long, ragged wail like someone trapped just inches away. My wife thought it was the wind, but I knew that sound. I've heard foxes scream. I've heard of bobcats. This was different. It was human. Next night, same thing, same time, same wall. We didn't tell anyone at first. I felt stupid. But after a week, I called a priest from town. He blessed the room, said a few things in Latin, sprinkled holy water. The screaming came anyway. We tried a medium. She refused to enter the room, said something was still unfinished. I tore down the wall again, right to the studs. There was nothing. Clean insulation, no messages, no bones, no explanation. I left the wall open that night. Still, the scream came. I watched it happen with my own eyes. No one behind the frame, no hidden speakers or tricks. Just screaming coming from nowhere, echoing like it was stuck in the wood grain itself. Now it starts earlier. It used to be 2:15, then 1:30. Last night, it started at 12:07. And it wasn't just her anymore. There was a man this time, lower, raspier, panicked. Sometimes they overlap. Sometimes they whisper before the screaming starts. I don't go in that room now. We keep the door shut, nailed shut, actually. My wife wants to move. Says it's cursed, but this land is all we've got. And somewhere deep down, I think if we leave, whatever's behind that sheetrock might follow. It was waiting in the insulation. Now it's part of the frame. I hear it settle every night like a breath held too long, and I know it's listening, waiting for one of us to be alone again.